Why Leonor wears the uniform but cries. Duty before self. The uniform settles on her shoulders with ceremonial precision. Pressed fabric, measured insignia, weight distributed exactly where it has always been, across centuries of expectation. Leonor de Bourbon y Ortiz stands within a tradition that does not ask how she feels. It asks only whether she can stand. This moment is often misunderstood. Seen as symbolism, read as pageantry, but the uniform is not worn to display strength. It is worn so the state never has to ask who stands for it. Spain's military dress, when placed on an heir, does not elevate the individual. It absorbs her. National identity is woven into these rituals. Not as spectacle, but as proof. Proof that continuity still has a body. From the outside, the image appears resolute. Stillness, discipline, control. Inside the institution, the image carries a different meaning. This is the moment where private boundaries begin to narrow. Here is the first quiet rupture in public understanding. The uniform is not about readiness for command. It is about readiness for substitution. If something fails elsewhere, the crown must remain visible. If confidence falters, the crown must remain composed. If politics fractures, the crown must remain intact. This is the living thread of continuity. And that thread does not bend easily around youth. At roughly 2 minutes into this story, the assumption breaks. Many believe the uniform is meant to harden her, to suppress emotion, to remove vulnerability. In reality, it does something far more exacting. It makes vulnerability irrelevant. The system does not demand that she not feel. It demands that feeling never interrupts function. This is where the misunderstanding deepens. Because the moments when composure tightens, when the eyes lower, when breath is measured, are not failures of strength. They are evidence of alignment. The state is not embarrassed by restraint. It is reassured by it. The uniform creates distance, not from the public, from the self. This distance is necessary. Spain's constitutional monarchy survives on separation, between power and emotion, between authority and desire. The uniform enforces that separation visually. This is why it is worn early. Before choice feels optional. Before identity fully settles. At 5 minutes, the phrase returns. Duty before self. Spoken again, it carries more weight. Because now the stakes are visible. Once the uniform becomes familiar, it stops being ceremonial. It becomes diagnostic. How she carries it is observed. How she enters rooms. How she receives salutes. How she withdraws without retreating. None of this is accidental. In Washington, these images are read as signals of continuity. Not fascination, but reassurance. A stable monarchy implies a predictable partner. In London, the reading is sharper. There is recognition. They know what it means when the uniform stops being symbolic and starts being structural. Canada and Australia watch with constitutional literacy. They understand how fragile symbolic authority can be if discipline appears performative rather than embedded. Germany watches without romance. Only durability matters. Whether the institution can still produce restraint on demand. This is not about admiration. It is about trust. By 8 minutes, the deeper mystery becomes impossible to ignore. Why does the institution allow moments of visible strain at all? Why not perfect polish? Because absolute perfection would be suspect. Continuity is not abstract here, it is embodied in visible presence. Presence that must appear human enough to be real, yet controlled enough to be reliable. The line is narrow, too distant, and legitimacy thins. Too open, and authority leaks. The uniform holds that line. And, sometimes, holding a line produces pressure. What remains deliberately unspoken is how early the cost is understood internally. This training is not designed to produce comfort. It is designed to produce availability. At 10 minutes, the escalation begins quietly. More frequent appearances. More proximity to military command without command itself. More expectation that presence alone stabilizes a room. The system begins to lean. Not publicly, structurally. This is where strain becomes meaningful. Not because she struggles, but because the institution begins to rely. Once reliance forms, reversal becomes dangerous. At 14 minutes, the point of no return is reached. When the uniform no longer feels like attire, but like function. At that point, the crown has effectively decided. This figure will not be shielded from symbolic consequence. From here on, every image circulates internationally. Every ceremony becomes comparative. Every restraint becomes precedent. The future threat is not dramatic. It is cumulative. Political fragmentation. Questions of relevance. Pressures framed as modernization. None of these attack directly. They test endurance. And endurance requires that someone continue to stand, visibly, without complaint. This is why emotion is not erased. It is contained. Because containment proves capacity. At 19 minutes, foreshadowing sharpens. The uniform is not only preparation for duty. It is preparation for scrutiny. Scrutiny that will increase. Scrutiny that will not soften. When constitutional systems feel pressure, they look to symbols. And symbols must not waver. The final image returns to stillness. The uniform again. The posture unchanged. Duty before self. Spoken one last time, it no longer sounds instructional. It sounds diagnostic. What comes next is unresolved. And that is precisely the point. Because institutions do not announce their future. They test whether someone can carry it. And once that test begins, it rarely pauses.